All right, everyone, welcome to the third digital economics call. We'll get straight into this one. You guys know the drill, but let me share my screen because I have something to go over that may provide some clarity, possibly some inspiration for this entire section. So, Joey, can you see the Notion screen? You may be muted. Can people hear me? Okay, I see a nod. Joey's having Wi-Fi issues, but okay. So here's the cue. Um, And what I want to bring up is I just put everything in here, literally everything. Like if an idea comes to mind, if like a tweet comes to mind, if anything comes to mind, I just put it in here. It's a mess, right? And one thing I do want to bring up because for a lot of this, it's pertaining to content creation. It's possible content ideas. And so as I'm walking or just talking to people or reading or whatever it may be, I'm putting ideas in here. And now what I do is I know a lot of people have had questions about this is I go on a lot of walks. And primarily I have one major walk in the middle of the day. It can be whenever, of course, but I go like after I finish work, I'll go and walk for like 30 minutes to an hour, right? It's a longer walk and I treat it as like a time block in a sense. It's like a creativity time block because when you're out and you're walking, you don't have any distractions around you aside from just the environment, which I wouldn't really consider a distraction. So at that point, you're pretty much fully focused on whatever you're listening to or whatever you're reading. I feel like this causes like a lot of confusion in people. Where it's like you can't read while you walk or you can't write notes while you walk when you text all the time while you walk and do other things like that. And I know I forget who his name is. He used to be a pretty popular copywriter and he's on Twitter, but like we were in the comments one time talking about like reading, and what he does is he literally takes physical books out on a walk and reads them and highlights and takes notes on the walk. So I haven't done that, but I'm just saying it's possible. And what I've noticed is that when you're listening or when you're writing or when you're reading on a walk, like the ideas just flow. It's hard to explain because when you're sitting down and say you're trying to do things in the queue or you're trying to be creative in a productive environment, which is counterintuitive, it's just hard to come up with ideas. Like I promise you, if you go on a walk and you listen to stuff and you start writing things down, ideas just come to you naturally. Like it just works. And so what I was doing is I usually pick something big. As I mentioned in the cohort, I like reading books or listening to long podcasts or long YouTube lectures because that provides more nuance. It provides more of what we're looking for, which isn't necessarily a content idea, although content ideas can stem from this. We're more so looking for like the firepower to craft a compelling piece of content. And so this is also why I recommend outlining, let's say, a newsletter or something at the start of your week or even a project, and then everything applies to it. It just works. It really just works that way. Where when I was writing out part of digital economics and I was listening to stuff and started thinking about EDM, I'm like that's a great way to like explain whatever concept this is. And when you start to think about like how things are connected and you have that outline to tie things back to, your consumption becomes much more intentional. And it's easy to kind of take your phone out, write that down in the queue, like what it's related to. So say I'm thinking about EDM or listening to EDM or just listening to a podcast on EDM, which is supposedly completely different from like online business. But then I can use it to craft a story. So when we're consuming things, we're looking for those examples or metaphors or pieces of a story or just like even that one word that wasn't in our mind before. It's like if you're walking around and you're trying to think of a tweet and you hear the word uh, responsibility, then that could spark an entire thought pattern that wouldn't have happened unless you heard that word. You know what I mean? So it's like you're searching for that word. You're just letting things go into your head so then you can build on top of that rather than trying to think of something as a starting point or as something to kind of craft the story. And so what I was doing is I was curious about systems thinking. I've heard about it many times. I knew that it would be helpful to actually listen to this. And so what I usually do is when I'm going through YouTube, I'll see a video that like piques my curiosity and I'll save it to my watch later. And then when I go on a walk, I'll throw this on in my headphones and then I'll have the queue open just so like I can get to it quickly and I'll start taking notes on that specific thing. So I have a whole lot of notes on the principles of system thinking. And I wrote this all in the walk, like as it's coming to me, right? And now there's a few things that I can do with this. I could create a thread on the however many there are here, like 17 principles of systems thinking. But if I do that, I have to, of course, give credit to actualize.org, mention the video, and like lead people to that because all of this is just straight notes from the video itself. This isn't like me coming up with things or summarizing or putting it into my own words or just like me coming up with my own principles of systems thinking. It's not that. So that's just one example. But then what I do with this, you guys would be putting it in the mind section where you like dissect it with the experiment and you create the discoveries and you have the processes and theories. In Roam, what I do at this point is I'm already fleshing things out. I know how the experiments work. I know how like finding the discoveries work. It's kind of second nature to me at this point because I've done it enough times where in some of these in here, I'm already fleshing it all out. And then all I have to do is copy and paste it over to the right one. So then I created my own. So I have this is an experiment with the discovery. It just looks different because it's in Roam. But I have like all of them here, right? And then of course I have the references up here. And so it's all here. And now it's stored. So it's not going to waste even if I'm not using it right now. So whenever I'm creating something, and let's say something can be explained with one of these principles of systems thinking, then I can come in here and just look at it. So if I'm explaining the phases and cycles like of life, I can talk about systems as a way of explaining that. I can talk about like what I put in my YouTube video today about like a previous story I had about like waves and stuff. And you're just trying to make connections in your thinking. You're sitting down, you're contemplating this, and you're having fun kind of creating a different angle of explaining whatever topic you are talking about in the content you're creating. So I just wanted to go over that really quick to like just show you kind of how I structure things, where I just come in here. If I'm reading a book, like The Fabric of Reality I started, I'll just create a little drop down for it and just write things as they come to me from the book. And then if I ever want to like dissect some of this, then I can start a experiment inside the actual command center and go from there. And then that's kind of the entire process. And then of course I can like clean out the queue and do that. And so I know there's some questions in the Discord, which we'll get to right now, that will also help provide more clarity on like what's actually going on here and like kind of how to structure this and how to not structure it. So we'll dive into some questions now relating to this, and I'm sure there are more questions that stem from what I just mentioned. So the first question from Chelsea is it not a good idea to have two lead magnets out at the same time as a beginner, even if they are solving two separate problems? No, I don't see it as a problem at all. Uh, it's just dependent on like what you're promoting and where those lead eventually, right? Because it's a lead magnet. That's kind of a cool connection. It like leads to something else, and it captures leads. But uh, that's the main thing, is you can use it as like a free resource to build authority, where you send people to that, and then you can either lead them to a product at the end, or a pack of coaching calls. Like if you have nothing to monetize and you want something to monetize, just create a minimum viable offer, right? Like outline what you would have wanted to learn pertaining to whatever it is that you talk about, like the basics or the fundamentals or however you learned, and you iterate with this over time. And you create a pack of 4 coaching calls. And then when you write the lead magnet, you plug that at the end. Like if you want to work one-on-one with me with this, DM me and we can talk about coaching calls. You don't need any fancy funnels just yet. We're not really shooting for optimization at this point. It's more so just having something to monetize, and a pack of coaching calls is probably the easiest thing you can do. All you need is the DMs and a Zoom call and a calendar invite to the other person. That's all you need. And then when you're on the Zoom calls, then you can start to flesh out your offer. But in terms of the lead magnets, no, two definitely isn't a problem. You just have to find the balance of promoting those and how you're going to promote those. So promotion usually on Twitter, at least, usually comes in the form of plugging it in a reply under your tweet. And usually the tweets are related. So if you have a lead magnet on content creation, then and you write a tweet on content creation, then it just makes sense to plug that under it. And now in terms of the balance of how often you promote, usually just once a day. Unless you're doing like a hardcore promotion or a launch, then like when it gets closer to the end of the launch, then you're promoting like every hour. But in terms of just like a sustainable plugging your newsletter or lead magnet, it's usually just once a day under a tweet that is relevant, or you can lead into the lead magnet and kind of create like something that goes off of it, and be creative with like how you actually get people to the lead magnet and get people to click. But yeah, two separate lead magnets, not a problem. And so another question is, I'm feeling resistance in doing engagement. Like I would rather write a newsletter. I know that forming connections is really important though. Is there any mental shifts you adopt when doing engagement that helps me make it more fun to spend time on? Yeah. So instead of thinking of it as only forming connections, think of it as generating content ideas or new angles for your content. Like some of my best and relevant content stems from replying to people. Like I literally write out one of my own tweets in the reply, and then I copy and paste it into Tweet Hunter. So that's pretty much it. Is like, think of it as kind of what we're doing here in the queue. It's dissecting their big idea. So you find a tweet that you're interested in and like catches your attention, and there's of course the benefit of connecting with that person and getting your name out there so you're more well known in the community. But that's what you think of it. It's like you start dissecting their tweet, and then you create your own tweet under it. So you're knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone. You're having fun kind of dissecting it, thinking of different angles, providing a unique perspective, which is going to get you more followers and engagement in the first place, because it's going to stand out amongst the sea of people that are just kind of repeating what that guy's saying in the tweet. But then you have that, and since it's formatted like a tweet, if you do it that way, it's going to get more engagement. It's possibly going to get retweets, and the other person will respect like how much time you put into that to, well, quote unquote time, if it did take you a lot of time. They'll respect the effort that you put into adding to the conversation of their actual tweet. So that's one mental shift, is you use it as inspiration for more content and relevant content, since you're building on top of the conversation from what's already being talked about on Twitter, but you're attacking it in a unique way. So that's one way that I go about it, and has definitely helped me, is like, because that's another thing, is like, what do I reply with? Right? That's a big question for a lot of people. And so if you were to run through like one of the experiments that we're talking about in this module, where you start to think about the problems of that topic, you start to think about the benefits of that topic, personal experiences, common objections, all of these other things that are really helpful in like sparking discussion under that tweet. And that's only going to get you more engagement. That's like probably the best way to go about it. And you just copy paste that over to Tweet Hunter or Hype Fury or whatever you're using to schedule tweets, or just Twitter, and then you post it. And so it's like a great way to also like practice tweet writing in real time and kind of gauge the engagement that you're getting under that account's tweet. Now, this sparks another thing. With engagement, you have to take into account how good their tweet actually is. And I don't mean good, I mean how polarizing and how curiosity inducing it is. Because if it's just a straight feel good tweet, not many people are going to go into the reply section, right? But if it's one that kind of sparks discussion or makes people post their own opinions, or maybe even causes people to argue in the comment section, more people are going to be clicking on the tweet to go and look at what's actually going on there. And so they're going to see your tweet more, and then it will get more engagement. So that's another thing, is to think beyond just engagement. Think like, how many people are actually going to see my reply, and like based on the tweet itself, like, is it actually sending people to look at the replies to see how the discussion is going? And yes, that is it. So from Nick, if you did it all over again, which social media channels would you start with and why? Which book are you reading right now? You need some inspiration for going out of town. Okay, so social media channels, Twitter. And I know, Ed, if you're in here, I remember you mentioned in Discord that I may be biased on this, and I 100% am, but it's Twitter. It is Twitter. I was talking with Dakota yesterday, and he asked me the question, like, why are people on why are we getting so much more engagement than people on Instagram? And where I'm talking like people that have like that usually reward what Instagram is meant for, which is kind of like vanity purposes. Like, why are Dakota and I getting more engagement than people that are posting half naked pictures? It's because it's writing, it's engagement, it's attention. Like, we know how to direct attention. We have validated tweets and ideas. We're focusing on communication and what actually creates engagement over just relying on something else. We're developing a skill set that captures attention with writing, and everything else stems from that. Like, if you just create a YouTube video without learning persuasion or psychology or what actually captures attention via writing and just that in general, then like if you do a YouTube video without that, your YouTube video isn't going to do as well. So if you start by actually putting effort into your writing and longer form writing with newsletter and Twitter, everything benefits from that. And you kind of train your brain to think in terms of like, okay, let's lead people, let's ease people into this by hooking them in, giving value, and then hitting them with like the true value at the end with like the heavy hitting last line or whatever it is. Because you film a reel based off of a tweet that did really well, that reel is going to do 10 times better than anyone who just pulls out a phone and starts recording like a thought that comes to their mind. So Twitter, by all means, because it will train you to be more persuasive. And if you don't practice becoming more persuasive and engaging with your content, then you're not going to grow on Twitter, and you're not going to grow on anything else. So if you can grow on Twitter, then you can grow on anything. And the like Twitter as a whole, the retweet button is just, it's so much more powerful than any other share feature on any platform. It's like on Instagram, I can do a shout out, which no one really does. It's like, you're not going to have thousands of people screenshotting your post and posting it to their account. In terms of the stories, only a fraction of your audience is going to actually look at the stories. So that's like a retweet, you're sending it to your entire audience. In terms of stories and sharing a post to your stories, you're only sending it to like 5% of that audience or something like that. So Twitter, 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 Twitter. LinkedIn would be the next one in terms of priority from what I've noticed recently. Instagram is kind of like, I don't know. There's a certain like collective consciousness that each social media platform has, and I think it's ranked from like Twitter, LinkedIn, uh, I don't want to put Instagram that high. Instagram is bad. Don't grow on there. But then after that, like TikTok's like bottom of the bottom. Medium's also high, but I've talked with Tim Denning, and they just censor way too much and don't value their creators. I don't know if Ashley could contest to that, but even though Tim Denning is like one of the biggest writers on Medium, he despises it. He hates the platform and the people running it. But in terms of the book, I'm listening to The Fabric of Reality right now. It's pretty good. I'd listen to it. I'm only like 30 minutes in, but it's solid. It's about knowledge creation, so it'll help with content creation. And then from Skeel, so how would you go about balancing the act of noting discoveries, theories, and processes? Have you ever had a moment when you sit down with intention, I got to experiment, and nothing would come to mind? I know ideally it would be to note things down in the queue and then sort them out at the end of the week, but what has worked best for you? So yes, this may lead into another question that I saw later, but it's really about finding what works best for you. Like if it's such like all of this is abstract, so it's very difficult to give concrete advice on this. What I do is sometimes I'll have it structured. Sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, I need to go through and clean things out. I'm going to do it on Saturday. And I'll like go through the queue and usually just delete everything because it's getting too big and like those ideas aren't fresh in my mind anymore, so I don't really have any use for them. So and I'll just continue filling them if I have a consistent content consumption habit. But a lot of the time it happens based off of inspiration, where the perfect thing comes to mind. I write it down, I start fleshing it out immediately, and then I just copy and paste everything over, fill in the blanks of what I'm missing in the experiment, think of a process, or like as I mentioned in the cohort curriculum, you don't need a process or a theory for every single thing. Those usually come with time and like making connections between the experiments. So like if you find yourself sitting down and nothing coming to mind, don't try and force it. Like that's maybe Joey has some psychological insights pertaining to like trying to force creativity, because I don't think that happens. Joey, do you have some default mode knowledge?
Yeah, sorry, it's really busy and noisy in here, so hopefully you can hear me okay. But yeah, it's really hard to force yourself to be creative because when you're really focused on something like this call, hopefully you're using a network of your brain that's very linear. It's called the past positive network. And so that's why, like, I experience often where I'm staring at an empty tweet box or tweet hunter or something like that, and I can't think of anything. And I feel that pressure. It's really hard to force yourself to be creative. So giving yourself some downtime intentionally, where you go for a walk or you just take some time sitting outside with a notebook or something like that, your laptop. Ideally a notebook, I would say usually, because that way you're minimizing the other distractions that you can take up your time with. But giving yourself that downtime just to kind of wait for ideas, not really wait for ideas, but give your brain space basically to come up with new ideas and new connections. And then you'll find stuff coming to you. Like I've said before, that's why shower thoughts are a thing, right? And then having some good notes you can refer to, it's good as well, because then you can just refresh those notes and then have that second session. And then you'll have your brain chewing on that stuff that you're reviewing. Then you can take that session with your notebook and then you'll probably come up with some new ideas.
Nice. Yeah, the way I'm starting to move with all of it is like there really has to be a separation between productivity and creativity. There has to be like the set deadlines for productivity. So whether it be like 1 hour in the morning or 4 hours of focused work or whatever it is, and then after that, stop. Like it's you aren't gonna force anything after that. It's gonna cause pain, and then have something scheduled. So like if you're working right now and you don't have too much time on your hands, it's like have the 1 hour in the morning where it's just focus, 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 get everything out, tweets, whatever it may be, and then in the afternoon, schedule a walk. Like it's non-negotiable at this point. Like I don't want to put it in the course because it's like part of the curriculum is telling people and teaching people how to go on a walk. It's like it's an absolute must in my opinion. Or just getting outside and like taking a break, prioritizing rest. Like even at the gym, sometimes best ideas come to me at the gym. It's just a matter of like taking a break, going on a walk, listening to something you're interested in, and then fleshing things out there. And I guarantee that will help. And that's another thing is like when ideas aren't coming to me or like I'm sitting down and I'm struggling with a problem, programmers deal with this all the time. I used to deal with this where, and you don't believe it because you get kind of stubborn in trying to solve the problem. Where if you're coding or you're programming and you encounter a bug and you can't figure out what's causing the bug and you're sitting there just banging your head on the table, like you're not going to figure it out. You're just sitting there wasting time at that point. But if you drop it and go on a walk or just like let time happen for 2 days, eventually it just comes to you. And you start working on other things and making progress on those. And then the answer comes to you. You're like, oh, why didn't I know that in the first place? And you fix the bug immediately and it's done. So that's like a very intangible skill that you have to start to become aware of and master is like if ideas aren't flowing, you're not going to be able to force them. Like you have to pretty much do the exact opposite of what you're doing now to get ideas flowing. You have to go on a walk, you have to maybe go swim in the pool, maybe go lay out and tan. Like just have a good time, but with the added benefit of being more creative and allowing that to transition over into your work or even the next focus work section where you'll have everything in the queue and you can just take them over and start filling everything out. And another thing
I
to
have a
note is
couple.
that one last thing. So another thing to note is that like all of this is like time. It's a long-term thing. Like I could give you the generic Twitter course advice where it's like, no, just write tweets, do all this stuff, and like see results immediately. But that's going to get you the same results as everyone else. And we've talked about that already in module 1 and 2. This is where things start to get very serious and is where like the creation actually happens and standing out from the crowd with unique perspectives and ideas. It's going to take like a year possibly to fill in the processes and theories and experiments inside of this Notion dashboard where then you'll be able to start piecing things together over time and create something even better. Like right now, I'm going through a lot of my old newsletters, and while those were good at the time with the experiments and the theories that I had, I just built on top of them and iterated, and now I have like much more compelling. They just iterate and get better over time as you continuously do this. So I hope that made sense. And I hope that helped. Enjoy.
I have a couple of quick things to add on that. So, what you mentioned with programmers, well, since you mentioned programmers, another thing that programmers do to help them with problem solving is what's called rubber duck debugging, where some of them literally have like a rubber ducky or something sitting on their desk. And when they get stuck on a problem, they'll literally like start talking to the rubber duck, or they'll talk to a team member or themselves or whatever. That's not the point. But they'll start talking through the problem. And they'll say like, okay, here's the situation. I'm having this problem. Here's a thought that I've had. And then as they're doing that, it'll click. And then they'll get an idea and it'll sort itself out. Like that's kind of a similar thing behind brain dumping that Dan and I talk about a lot. So if you can kind of harness this, you don't have to have a rubber duck. I talk to my cat sometimes, or I'll call my mom or something like that and just talk through stuff. But one thing you can do if you're not feeling any ideas, you can just start writing about something that you know, like start writing something from a book that you like. Just start like rehashing it. And then as you're doing that, you might come up with new ideas from that. You'll be like, oh, here's some new connections I haven't thought of before. And then the other thing I was going to mention is I know that we're all busy. We don't have a lot of time to sit around and do nothing. And that seems like a waste of time. but I promise you, it's one of the most productive things you can do is for like have a little bit of protected downtime every day so that you're giving your brain space to work on these things. But if you're keeping yourself entertained and engaged and going nonstop from the time you get up to the time you go to bed, then your brain's not going to have that space to be chewing on these problems and giving you ideas. So if you just give yourself a bit of time, like a walk is great. Like walks have so many benefits, but giving yourself a bit of that time each day, you'll really start to see benefits from that. It's well worth the time.
Nice. I like that. And it kind of it reminds me of an old tweet I had where like I did this one time unintentionally. Like I got really pissed at someone and I wrote out like a text to them with the intention of sending it, but then I just deleted it because it's like I don't want to send this. But then it really helped like solve the problem because I wrote out all of my thoughts and just deleted it. So I don't know, maybe you could do that too. Is like write out a fake text to someone explaining it. Maybe that's your rubber ducky. And so, next question from Chelsea is there a ratio or metric that you keep in mind in regards to time spent daily on consuming slash researching versus creating? I easily get lost in consuming content, and while it's fun to learn and explore, it tires me out and leaves me with so many ideas in the queue unfinished. Okay, so there's more to this, but in terms of that, um, it's it's difficult. So with my queue, it gets filled up extremely quick. Like I'll just note random things down, and I have to delete most of them, and it's fine. It's like, what use are they sitting there if I'm not using them to create? So at that point, it's just a matter of clearing them out and like deleting them, sending them to the void or whatever it may be. Because if you're consistently consuming, those ideas are going to continue coming and they're going to apply to your content either way. So don't hesitate to straight up delete stuff, especially if it's overwhelming. Just like if you're not going to use it and there's no use case for it right now and you can't think of ideas for potential theories or processes, just delete it. That you'll if that idea was meant to belong in your entire philosophy, it'll find its way back in maybe a year from now, 2 years, maybe even 10 years. Like I didn't understand like things like awareness or consciousness or whatever people like these big concepts that people are talking about. I'd write them down all the time, but I didn't understand them until like 5, 10 years later where I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about. And I came back across it. So finishing that is wondering how I can make boundaries but not set expectations that will stress me out. Right now, I'm probably consuming 2 to 3 hours a day and only creating 30 minutes. I think that's a good balance. Like everyone talks about like create more than you consume, which makes sense, but you can only create so much. It's like 3 tweets a day, a newsletter a week, um, possibly lead magnets or whatever you're building out at the time. It's like there's only so much you can and should create. And then aside from that, like if you're it depends on your intention behind what you're consuming. Like if you're just scrolling and doing mindless stuff, then you're not really taking notes or ideas anyways, and I would advise against that. Sometimes, unless it's entertainment, and entertainment is not necessarily a bad thing. Um, but in terms of like reading and other stuff, I don't see that as a problem at all. Like I know billionaires or whatever read like a book a week or whatever it is. Like I don't see a problem with that. Like as long as it's not overwhelming and like you understand that those ideas are allowed to die in the queue, like you don't have to keep them there and you probably shouldn't keep them there for more than a week or two, then yeah, that's pretty much it. I think reading can serve much more of a purpose than just being like used for all of this. Like reading is just a good thing to do in general. And if an idea sticks out and you want to flesh it out and make it your own, then you can expand on it and knock that out. So it's like an ebb and a flow. There's no set way to do all of this. It's more so we've only been at this for a week. Or no, not even, it's from Tuesday. So it's been like 4 or 5 days. So in the coming weeks, it will continue to make sense and evolve, and you'll kind of find your own flow. But that's the main thing. All right, so from David, how often do you organize your command center? More generally, describe your organization and reflection process. Any advice on best practices for linking between various pages or within? I'll start with the first one. So, how often do you organize your command center? It's usually every week because it's all holistic. Like that's the exact thing is um, when I'm doing the newsletter, I'll usually both outline it and outline my week at the same time. And so that's somewhat of a reflection in itself. And I start to think about things, and all of those reflection ideas can be put in like the newsletter, or can be used as an intro with a story or something I learned this week. And you can start to like kind of bake your life and like blur the lines between work and life where you're growing yourself, but you're also growing your business. So you're reflecting on your week, and it's like not only that, it's a content creation process. What did you learn this week? Those tweets always do extremely well. What problem did you solve in your life this week? That always does well. What experiments are you running in your life? Like, what are you testing out? What are you building? What are you learning from that? And all of that other fun stuff. So, in terms of organizing the command center, again, like my process is like the only thing that is really structured in my life is the like focus work in the morning. Everything else is really based off of inspiration, and I get it done immediately. Where an idea will come to me and it's like, oh, I should add this to my vision, or I need to update this goal, and I'll go in there and do it immediately on my phone. And like if you want to test your own schedule on coming in and doing this, that's lifestyle design, or that's uh, like all of this as a whole is like if you find the flow of this works for me scheduling this and knocking it out on Sunday, and there's no problems there and it just flows perfectly, then I would do that. Um, but for me, I've noticed that like a lot of the times nothing comes to mind, and it just isn't worth doing at that time. And we're so used to just like time frames in general, like 7 day time frames, or like X o'clock, you got to do this. And that has kind of started to fade away for me, where now it's more so like inspiration comes to mind, I get it done, it's done. And then I have like my maintenance and like building things out and other things that need to be structured done in the morning. And so, any advice on best practice for linking between various pages or within ideas in creative clarity? Let me look at this. So the main thing for me there is just the cue and the mind. Like the other stuff is kind of the inspiration lab is there for inspiration. And if you feel compelled to add things to like your tribe of mentors or your domain of mastery and everything else there, it's there. The main thing I use those for is to flesh everything out at the beginning, where that those are what I'm focusing on. Those are my content ideas. Those are the things I should be learning about. But then off of that, it's kind of just based on curiosity and like what your priority is at that given moment pertaining to the content you're creating. So, bringing the question back up, best practice for linking between various pages. Uh, that's really it. Like, in terms of me personally, it's kind of just like the cue and the mind are the biggest things for me, where everything goes into the cue. The things that deserve or feel like they can be turned into experiments, processes, theories, that's what they're turned into. And especially the ones that I want to make a part of my brand. I think that's a really big thing, is the ones that I could see like being a pillar in my brand and possibly even replacing one of the interests in my domain of mastery. Like, how can I start to create my own interests that other people can become interested in? Like Jack Butcher has the personal monopoly. I think that's Jack Butcher. I hope it's Jack Butcher. I put it in the course, but um, like for example, he could have in his bio at some point, once he's gained some form of authority and a following and has formed that connection with his audience, he could have a his bio would be, I talk about personal monopolies, um, building once and selling twice, or whatever it may be. He's creating his own category. He's creating his own brand pillars at that point that really separate him. And it allows him to build out the depth under all of those things in his articles, potentially in a book, and everything else in his content, and just like fleshing those out. And so the next, what are your strategies for refocusing on aimless content consumption? Not so much specifically within a specific deep work or focus session, but high level. A lot of the time, if it's all it's based on feeling. It really is. Where if I don't feel like listening to something on a walk, I'm not going to listen to something. If I don't feel like reading an article, I'm not going to read something. It's like when I need ideas, then I know, okay, it's time to listen to something and go on a walk and start like typing things out and just getting ideas flowing, like a brain dump in a sense that opens up all the other things in your mind. So refocusing on aimless content consumption, that would really that'd be up to you in a sense. Like if you're aimlessly scrolling Twitter, that's kind of like the classic advice of like get off Twitter and make it a habit to not do that. During the week, I find myself straying from the 1 to 3 topics I wanted to focus on consuming. Oh, that was in addition to the question. Pertaining to that, I don't see that as a problem at all. I would say that's curiosity, and I say you should lean into that and create content around that so you can understand those deeper and see how they connect to your main interest, because they do. Well, possibly. Of course, there's caveats there. And so, those are the questions. If we have any more, feel free to leave them. Joey, have you noticed anything or any questions in the chat?
Yes. Yeah, there was one about TikTok. I've seen a lot of people talking about organic growth on TikTok. What do you think? I mentioned Jimmy Farley because I know that you like this stuff. But
Yeah, Jimmy Farley is he's so good at TikTok, and I know we have where is he? Mean Jay is in here. So in terms of TikTok, I'm sure he'd be happy to strategize in the actual cohort chat. The main, well, so the thing with TikTok to me and Twitter as a whole is it kind of it means nothing unless you're like building that connection with long form stuff. Like I feel like everyone flooding towards Reels and TikToks is a insanely good opportunity to make yourself stand out by writing newsletters and threads. Like that's how you're going to make the sales. That's how you're going to build authority. It's usually not going to come from a quick 30-second TikTok or even one tweet. It's just not going to happen. And so like that's kind of what I did as I was growing on TikTok at first, but you have to have somewhere to send them. You have to have that lead magnet if you're going to build that deeper connection. You have to have those newsletters or something else that provides more nuance and has the potential to make sales, or even just like grow your brand as a whole. Because the people that, let's say Greg O'Gallagher on TikTok, like he's doing very well, but then he has an entire YouTube channel that people can dive into and learn more about what his entire philosophy and what he's about and buy his products. Of course, there's like specific use cases there where e-commerce brands are killing it, but that's because it's e-commerce. It's not like an information product where you have to educate people to the point of even understanding what your product is about and getting people to buy it. With an e-commerce product, it's like you create a TikTok on like with someone using the product interestingly in their life, and someone's like, oh yeah, I want that, and then they go and buy it. But instead, where it's an info product and you kind of have to ease people into it and raise their levels of awareness, then that's where long form content comes into me. So TikTok, not good, not bad. It's just a matter of like, where are they going next? It's a traffic generating platform, just like Twitter or Instagram. Where are you building the depth? Where are you nurturing those leads? Where are you building authority? And everything after that. Now, that also brings up the thing of you do need to focus on growth. You do need to prioritize growth, especially at the beginning. That has to be a pillar that eventually just becomes automatic over time. So if you're just starting out, then definitely I'd recommend building that initial audience that you can eventually nurture with the authority stuff. but I wouldn't expect to just be able to monetize straight out of the gate on any other platform. Monetize effectively. Of course, there's all caveats with this. You can definitely make sales from TikTok and having a product alone, but in terms of like an entire value ladder and building an income that is sustainable that you can live off of, that's going to come from depth, long form, and lead magnets and other things, and educating people and raising people up those levels of awareness, which is very hard to do with just one platform alone, unless you're hyperpolarizing and all the other caveats that can come along with that. So, in general, if you want to have a foolproof or a very good, the best way of doing it, it would be both a balance of short form, long form, authority building, raising them up, building out an entire ecosystem as we're doing with this to consistently make sales and nurture the leads that want to dive deeper and actually learn from you.
Next question was, I think you touched on this a bit earlier, but how much Roam plays into a part of your creative process versus the command center?
So Rome for me is the mind. It's the same thing. So Rome, in my case, the command center is mainly for. It was before all of this. It was initially for the goals, the vision, the routines, recurring tasks, content flow, daily focus, and the inspiration lab, values, pretty, yeah, I got everything except for the mind, which I have in Rome. And the only reason I don't switch it over is because it would be extremely tedious and annoying to get everything over and organized. So I'm just keeping it in Rome. That's my main thing. Is that Rome came before I I was like, this came to me by refining the process in Rome. Like, I started with the Zettelkasten method, didn't like that. I switched to Smart Notes, didn't like that. And I tried all of these different like note taking methods, and eventually like just created this one because it worked well for me, and it like fit perfectly into all of this. And so then after that, like the queue was already in Notion, everything else was already in Notion, and then me adding the mind here was more or less to give you guys a free way of doing this and keeping everything organized in the command center itself. So Rome plays a huge crucial process, but over time it becomes so much easier where I'm maybe adding a new discovery once. Well, it depends. Like sometimes I'll go in and I'll add five because the inspiration's just there and I write them all out and it makes sense. But at other times, maybe it's like once every 2 weeks, maybe even once a month. Maybe I didn't even consume a book that month because everything else was flowing. It's like the Twitter was flowing, newsletter was fine, everything else was going well, and I didn't really need anything. And like I knew that the queue was just gonna load up with stuff. So again, there's no like time frames with this creativity stuff. It just doesn't work like that. It's productivity, creativity. There needs to be the separation there and the understanding there that one is very time bound and time dependent. The other doesn't care about time at all and is it's against the point to try and fit creativity into a time frame. It doesn't work like that.
Next question was, in Notion, there are two processes, the mind and another is APEG. Which one do you use when?
Oh, the processes. So in well, both they cross over. So a lot of the time you'll find yourself like after 5, 10 newsletters, you're gonna have to dig in and start developing, like you're talking about the same thing just from a different angle. And so you'll be using some of the same like processes that are a pillar in your brand. Where for me, I talked about this for 4 newsletters in a row just from a different angle, where it's vision, goals, priorities, uh, priority tasks, all this other stuff, because it has so many different use cases. It can be used in content creation, it can be used in life in general, it can be used in other things like that. But that's more of a meta process. So in terms of when you're writing the newsletter or you're using the APAG framework, that's more so what are the actionable steps that relate to the topic you're talking about. And then in terms of the mind, that can be taken into the mind and fleshed out from an experiment, possibly made into a theory. And it's all just, it's a balance. It's like a balancing act of like writing all of these things and then tying them all in together if they deserve a place in the mind. Because the main reason we're storing everything in the mind is to write them in a newsletter. So if you're able to just write creative newsletters like left and right, then you don't really need the mind until like you run out of ideas or you're not able to be as creative as you want to be. And so they're the same thing, but when you're writing the newsletter, it's just smart to have an actionable process relating to the topic at the end of the newsletter because that's valuable. That's what you're leading people into. And then the mind is, of course, just coming up with processes based on what you're talking about. And all of those could eventually be turned into newsletters, or they can just be helpful and used in other places.
Looks like Ollie threw a question on Discord, but there was one other here in Zoom. It was, what is your process for creating lead magnets?
It's one, have the idea. So it really depends. It's what is the purpose of the lead magnet. So for me, the 7 days to genius was to like have and build authority in the creative domain because I didn't have anything related to that that would lead into this cohort or kind of just what I wanted to pivot into. I was kind of tired of, what was it? Like in Modern Mastery HQ, I was like kind of running out of ideas. I had already put a lot of business stuff in there and didn't know what to do next. So it's like, okay, what's the next evolution of the brand? And that seemed to be creativity and the creator economy and just diving deep into that. Again, it's like this whole curiosity pursuit thing and how your brand and content evolves as you do. And your brand is really just like what you're curious in at the time. That's really it. So in terms of actually building out that's the first thing is having an idea and a purpose for the newsletter. Is it for just building authority? Is it leading into a product? Is it leading into a coaching offer? Is it very bottom of the funnel? Is it for lead generation for your newsletter based on what you talk about there? And then from that, so you have the idea for the actual newsletter, and then same process for any project is outline it, let it sit, like fill it in as best you can, brain dump, outline, just be messy. Like don't pay attention to structure at this point. Just get all of the ideas out of your head. If you have to write this in a queue while it's on your mind, then do that. But then you outline it, and then you start to fill in the outline, and then as you go about your week, you'll have more ideas that you can put back into that and start to flesh it out even more. But then from the outline, you start writing the actual lead magnet. So if it's an ebook, you open Google Docs and you start writing and structuring things out like you would a newsletter. And as you're writing it, you just write it, right? So you outline, start writing the first draft, you come through, you add ideas as they come to you, and eventually you just package it up. You can put that on Gumroad. You can put it on whatever email marketing software you use. You can just download the PDF, and when someone signs up to your newsletter, you can link them to the PDF, and a bunch of other things like that. So if there's a question that sparks from that,
I can share that Loom video that I made a while back. I'll track it down and I can put that in the cohort chat because people thought that was pretty helpful apparently. So
cool.
That one where I went through the process that I used to create my latest one.
Yeah, that'll be
I'll
helpful.
find that and like it. Okay. And Ollie said that he had put another question in Discord.
Cool. All right, so that question, I rewatched the thread section where you spoke about that if you earn under 833.4 as a solopreneur, read this thread. I was completely mesmerized by it. I tried to read through and understand why you structured it in the way you did, but struggling to put the pieces together. Would you be up for doing a breakdown / case study at some point? Might be good application whilst learning the principles behind writing threads. Got a load of light bulbs whilst trying to work it out myself, but my knowledge isn't there to identify things well yet. So let me look at that really quick. Because I don't think this one was really scheduled. It's more so like I'm launching a product. I need to write a thread today. I'm going to write a thread. If you are... I need to look up the right actual thing. But I'll share my screen. It's not even showing up. Ah. All right. So let's break this down real quick. Desktop 3, I believe that's it. Sure. Okay. So we have the hook. So here's my thought process going through this, because like at this point, it's like you it's the same thing with most creative endeavors where it's difficult for people to do what I'm doing because I've been doing it for 3 years. Uh, Threads specifically, where like they're just second nature. It's like I know how to write a high engaging thread off the top of my head, but that's not how I started. I started with copywriting frameworks. I started with struggling and taking weeks to create my first sales page. It took like hours to create a first thread. I didn't have all the knowledge in my head, but now it's like I know exactly what I'm writing here. I'm just going to write it. And so with this, this is kind of hitting the problem. It's just a different way of hitting the problem, where if people can assume their own problems with all of this, then they're going to be interested in reading the rest of the actual thing. So that's one lesson, is when you are leading people into what you're talking about, you're not necessarily it's good to explicitly state the problems that you're going to be tackling in that specific piece, but at the same time, it's more so like you're painting a perspective. You're kind of starting to build the boundaries of what you're going to talk about here and what people can look forward to. So you're also like opening up a curiosity loop here, where I have the main points. So think of this as an outline of the thread. I just did it in the thread, and then went on from there. So the first one is, this is the outline: growing a social media brand. So what does that take? It takes a personal brand. And so I explain the personal brand. Again, and again, like what composes a personal brand? It's profile picture, bio, link that directs people to content. Where's the depth? So I already have this. This is a process of mine, as you guys know, in the actual command center. It's your vision, your goals, your values, what you have experience in, what you're learning about. This is a personal brand. This is like off the top of my head. Well, no, it's not off the top of my head. It's inside my lab, where I was listening to Ken Wilber. He talked about becoming a map maker. That stood out to me. I didn't even listen to the rest of what he was saying. I'm like, that makes sense. It's like that I'm going to flesh this out. What does it mean to become a map maker? And where did I have this? Under personal brands are mapping out a giant mind. I have one in here. Your product is the map. Yeah, your brand is a story, your content is a map, your product is a game. And so this one, you are a story. So that, like, all of this, it would be very difficult to understand this, because this is taken, like, this entire thing is a culmination of like so many different things that I've consumed. It's like I'm combining storytelling at this point. I'm combining like human understanding. I'm combining psychology, and I'm making sense. Like I have all of these dots in the very first section of the cohort, where I have that graphic where there's like the white dots that are filled in, and then there's empty dots. So what I'm aware of is like vast with it. When I'm talking about map making, there's so much there to me. I can talk about game theory. I can talk about some of Alan Watts' metaphors about like people all thinking of different ways to approach something. And then map making is just Ken Wilber's way of saying that, where it's like he's talking about how he is a map maker. Like he's kind of connecting the dots, and he's creating these concepts, and everything pretty much what I'm teaching you in this course is like how he's mapping, or maybe this even ties in with Jordan Peterson's maps of meaning, where it's like you're creating maps for people to navigate the world better. And so I applied that to content creation because that's what I talk about. And it just makes sense. And that's what I wrote about this. So this would be very hard to dissect because it's just like a year of study and consumption and research. And so that's what I mean when like this is a process. Like you're stacking knowledge and you're making connections. And it takes a long time to do that. It really does. But that ultimately is what's going to set you apart as you continue growing. And it happens naturally when you know this is what you're supposed to be doing, where a lot of people get stuck in the growth trap on Twitter, which is necessary at first. It's necessary at first. You need to grow. Like you need to ease your audience into your weirder ideas once you have like growth on autopilot. Once you hit 20, 30, 40K followers and you're just growing because you have an audience, then you can start to work in like more of these complex things that aren't necessarily formulated for engagement. It's like again the metaphor of a YouTube vlogger, where you go back and look at any of their videos. They played the game. They played the engagement game. They grew, and now they can do vlogs or just talk about their life or do whatever they want because they've already built the audience and they've already built that connection with other people. And so it's a natural progression is if you are building out your mind and you're starting to develop these unique perspectives, and you are just becoming smarter in a sense, or you're learning and you're able to distill what's in your head into content, then this just builds. Like this becomes future firepower for you while you're playing the engagement game, while you're growing, and then your content just evolves naturally. So that was a long way to explain the whole map maker thing. But then social media growth, again, it's all experience. Like it gets so much easier with experience over time, because this is just off the top of my dome. I've like over 3 years of doing this, I've seen so many different social media growth guides that I just assume most of my audience did as well. And so I gave them the 80-20 of that, and it's all just condensed information. And so that is also building on top of the outline. So growing a brand on social media, what does that mean to me based on what I've read, what I've done? Personal brand. What's my unique perspective behind a personal brand? Social media growth. So how do you actually grow that personal brand? So this is like content is involved in that as well. I handled an objection here just because it came to mind, where I'm doing exactly what people say, but I'm not growing. You aren't getting eyes on your profile. You think your brand's better, but you haven't taken the time to reflect and improve or seek help and invest. How do you fix this? Yeah, same thing. This is all just like off the dome from experience. I've probably rewritten this thread 5 different times throughout my content creation journey, where it's just a rundown of, it's a foundational like business concepts for what I talk about, and it's just gotten more complex and nuanced and authoritative over time as I've done it. Originally it would have been like, okay, well, so if you want to start an online business, read this. So how do you start? Well, you're going to use social media as traffic. You're going to have to create a product or service and monetize. And then on top, it's like, okay, so how do you build a personal brand? You do this, this, and this. You learn about it and you teach it. And then how do you grow on social media? You learn about it, you do it, you teach it. And then like the complexity wouldn't really come in until later, once you have more experience and just touching points and traps that you've fallen into that you can help other people navigate and all of this other stuff. And so a basic rundown of growing in the DMs. So this is pretty much like the cohort in a nutshell, but not as in depth or as valuable. It's more so like uh, it's showing, not telling. It's or telling, not showing. It's more so like here's the 80/20 of everything. It's not going to be very helpful, but that's not why you're on Twitter. And giving people like a broad outline of what's actually going on here. And so with this thread, this is like, where is it in here? So this comes down to building authority, right? I was kind of like practicing what I preach here, where if I have a product and I want to launch a product, then I need to build authority. It's like before all of this, before this, I was just talking about self development. I was writing high engaging tweets based on like what I'm experiencing day to day life. And then I knew that I was going to be launching the cohort. And so it's like, okay, time to build some authority. And so I did. And a lot of people saw it. And I put a lot of, or I didn't necessarily put a lot of time into this thread, but I knew what was going to hit based on what I previously experienced. And so I took a broad rundown of the course because that's what I'm prepping people to buy, right? And that's how I'm building authority. And so I pretty much just gave like an 80/20 of the actual course. And so that's why in here, when you're building authority, that's what I recommend. When you're building out the course, quite literally write down the outline in a thread and fill in some blanks so it's actually valuable, and then slap a hook on it. And now you're building authority and you're outlining the thread. Like things can cross over. It's the same thing with a lead magnet. It's like you outline the lead magnet and then you write the newsletters to fill that lead magnet in, and then you just copy paste the text from the newsletters into the lead magnet, and now you have something that's static and that people can see at any time, and that can generate leads for you. Like if you want to right now, just start building out your course in newsletters, and then eventually you take those, you slap a price tag on it, you make the newsletters unavailable, and you launch the product. And then you can distill those into threads and just give the 80/20 rundown of what's going on there. So that's the main thing, is there isn't really a way to break this down because it was based on something that I was launching and a lot of experience that I had prior to this. It's kind of like a sales page in a sense, but like a valuable sales page that isn't really selling someone on this. So yeah, I just went off. So I hope that kind of answers the question. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, and it just gets better with time and experience. All right. Was there any other questions that got asked in the meantime?
Don't believe so.
There's a
What
link.
social media app are you using for LinkedIn since you use TweetHunter for Twitter?
I just post on LinkedIn. I don't use an app. That's what I do for Instagram as
And
well. Twitter is the only thing that is scheduled.
do you use the AI generator in TweetHunter?
Hell no. I am my own AI. Just kidding. We're all our own AI. But no, that's actually the thing, is like I'm kind of like I'm templates, like content templates and all this other stuff. They're great. They're very good. They get engagement. They grow. But then when it comes to depth and authority, if you want to stand out and you like actually want to separate yourself from quite literally 99% of the people that are using the templates and doing the same thing, that's the entire reason behind this course in general. That's the entire reason behind module 3. And nobody's doing that. So it's very abstract. It's very abstract and hard to like pinpoint and create all these structured and templates and processes off of it, because that's just going to make you end up like everyone else, because everyone can create those processes. You have to create your own way of doing all of this stuff. And so module 3 is like a soft guidance of doing that. Oh yeah, in terms of TypeShare, I've seen TypeShare. Dicky keeps trying to get me on it, but as I said, I'm just not a fan of templates. Like I don't want to be. This is of course like individual to me, and I have my biases, but like I that's what I believe sets me apart, is that I don't use any of that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So we've been talking on the chat a little bit about Rome and Obsidian and then how they link different thoughts, but I'm just wondering whether Notion has a similar way, just because like we're using the Q, the Inspiration Lab, the Mind. So again, I'm not a Rome user, but I've heard that you can link them, and it gets to a point where it actually helps you link them. So just wondering if Notion has a similar way of connecting or linking if you're posting or writing in uh, mind versus a queue or whatever, and two different posts could be, like construed as one single topic or something.
Yeah. So the way that I think about it is I know a lot of people use Rome and Obsidian and RevNote for writing, which the connections make sense there. But in so to answer the question, no, there's no, I've looked it up. There's no way to do that in Notion itself. But I don't find myself like go through the um I go through the process of like connecting things in Rome, but I never use that because that's what my newsletter's for. Like my newsletter is the connection. That's what it all is. It's like the R- Rome in a sense is just housing the building blocks. It's housing the potential connections, and my newsletter is a way of connecting those and actually putting it out to the audience. And then those just stay on the those stay on the internet for life. Like they're leverageable, they're digital real estate for life. The more newsletters you write, the more impact you have the potential of having, again, with the very important caveat that if you are growing, growth is number one priority at first, and then eventually they just stack, compound, and your authority like gets crazier and crazier because you're consistently dishing out these unique perspectives to people. And eventually it gets to the point where you're like creating these very complex infusion style articles. And that's the fun in it, right? Is like as I mentioned, I created like 4 or 5 different newsletters week after week talking about vision, goals, priorities, that entire dynamic between those. And I was just piecing together like different pieces of Rome, what I have in Rome or what would be in Notion, to help explain those things and like show the connections between all of that and pretty much hit that concept of vision, goals, priorities from all angles and like solidify it in people's minds. It's like the way I understand things best is by pulling from a bunch of different sources. It's like if I want to understand uh, struggle, then I read about it from philosophy, spirituality, psychology, and all of these other things. And then I form my, like, I can pull from all of those to help explain it better. And I'm going to understand it on a much deeper level that way. And so if I treat my content as that, where I'm attacking one topic from multiple different angles by using these building blocks that I've stored in Rome, then my audience is going to understand it much, much, much more. And they're going to attribute that understanding to me, which is like authority. That's what authority is. It's depth. So as I mentioned in the uh, one of the modules, is that there's 2 ways to build authority. There's like results or social proof, which you can flex on the timeline and post your testimonials or whatever. But there's also depth and understanding. If you're the one that can, it's like a game of understanding. Like if you can make something make sense, just like give people that dopamine or that excitement from that clarity, then that's what leads to authority. Like I've had people, that's why long form content's so good. Is like whether it be the podcast or the newsletter or other things, it's like there's no objection handling there. Like people trust you at that point. People just like if your ideas and thoughts are developed and good and they're understandable, then like people will buy your stuff if it's relevant. Like for uh Justin Welsh, for example, like his landing pages are like maybe 300 to 500 words. They're like nothing. It's because people trust him. He's built so much depth over time with all of his content that it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna buy. He knows exactly like what important parts of an argument to string together to make it make sense for someone. And then when it makes sense to them, that's like you're raising their awareness to the point of, okay, yeah, it's time to buy. So that was a bit of a tangent there, but all in all, did that help with the Notion question about being able to connect things? If you're still here, Oscar.
Cool. I think that was pretty much all the questions. I handled a couple others in the chat.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah, we're tad over on time. So
Hey, Dan,
yes.
I have a question for you that I think you're uniquely qualified to answer. So, like, I find that people do really well with I guess the life skills or life, like, ways to make life easier and better. And I guess in a way, it's like, the maturity of a human soul, I guess.
Mm.
And even, when you guys did that Twitter space the other day with T, him and I jumped on a Zoom call for like 15 minutes later and I helped him through something personal. And like he sends me a message and said, I slept like a baby last night. I haven't done that in years. And it was just literally like a 15-minute call. I gave him a couple of tools that I thought would help him in what he was dealing with. Probably also that someone showed that they valued and listened to what he had to say. But I'm like, so I struggle with that because that isn't necessarily something that's easily monetizable. And I know that is profound. Like people send me messages and like, change my life, da 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 da, like things like you do with that, human and actualization. However, the stuff they want to pay for is the business stuff because I have this crazy business background. But I actually prefer to talk about the human soul stuff. Like it's all interrelated. And I'm just trying to figure out how, like on Twitter, I would rather just help people with life stuff and the business stuff, not so much. But I'm trying to figure out how to integrate the two in a way that monetizes my mind and my wisdom. So that I can just like scale that so more people can access it, I guess. So and you seem to be able to do it well, but then when I look at your monetization strategy, it's on things like building Twitter and like not necessarily on the human soul part, which you're really good at as well. So I'm just wondering, if you have some recommendations for someone. Like I only have 10K followers, so it's not like I can just go and run a Twitter account business or something like, build your Twitter account.
Well, okay. So to answer that last question, it's you can promise the results that you have. So
Okay.
if I it's funny you mentioned 10K is when I hit 10K, that's when I released my Twitter product, and it was called 10K followers. It's like I
Okay.
promised that it was pretty much it's the experience model. It's like the desired outcome is the 10K followers. Here's exactly how I got there. I'm quite literally teaching people that were 1, 2 steps behind me, right? And it
Okay.
sold very well because of that. The other thing, so funny thing I that caught my mind like on Twitter, this was like a year ago, is that at the end of the day, like everyone is a life coach. Like that's what people are looking for. And
Right.
the separation of like how can I put the most enticing offer for what people want out there is marketing. But then the how you actually solve those problems is your own method. It's like if you're promising business growth, and that's example business growth, the how for you doing that is the soul or all of that stuff. It's your unique mechanism and your way of doing that based on your experience. And half the time, like I remember, like I was talking about this with someone in the comments. I think it was Justin Welsh, like how everyone turns into a mindset coach, like in coaching, like all my all coaches are mindset coaches or life coaches. It's just packaged up in a way that's perceived well by their audience and will sell. So it's like there's a balance there because you do have to have like or like possibly a system for getting X specific result and all of this other stuff. But it really does come down to like the problems that people experience on a day-to-day basis, where a lot of my stuff is positioned around um, like business and content creation and like social growth and all this other stuff. But the problems, especially with this cohort, I started to lean a bit away from the monetization side, and that's what the bachelor's curriculum was. Like there's no monetization involved. It's mostly like creativity and this other stuff. And so when I think about the problems, it's like what we were talking about in the Discord with um like writing down the why behind what you do, where like why I would need like more fleshed out outline of this, but it's like why. So if Sahil, for example, was going to sell the no code product, why? What are the problems associated with that? The no code is just the vessel. It's just the how. Where the landing page is based off of you, like what you're experiencing, your problems. So pertaining to no code, why did he get into no code in the first place? It's to increase his skill set. It's to increase his value in the world. It's to open up potential opportunities with that skill set. It's potentially to make more money in the future, right? It's all positioned around the health, wealth, relationships verticals, but the how, the vessel, like the course itself is not, it is and should align with the marketing message. But the marketing message is more so like, what are the most painful problems that people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis? What is your unique how for overcoming that, whether it be no code, social growth, just things you've done in your day-to-day life that are practical and understood, which like the human soul stuff is, it's difficult to market because it's high consciousness. It's like it's very difficult on Twitter because it doesn't get any engagement. It's not that quick dopamine hit. And so it's the same thing with the awareness and the funnel, where if you can be fulfilled by what you're doing with the actual work by gradually easing people into that and kind of starting out kind of like cringy top of funnel on Twitter and all this other stuff, it's like it's kind of a necessity to an extent with at least some of your content. That's what growth is. It's just part of the game. But like turning people from cringe to based is kind of the name of the game as a whole. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that was kind of all over the place, but does that help? Any questions spark from that?
Um, you basically told me the hard uphill battle of it is just exactly what you've experienced. And so, um, yeah, I've been watching very closely what you do. I think we align, and I'm the female version, older female version of you in some ways, and so I'm kind of watching what you're doing and how you're doing it. But I think the generation now the market you're dealing with is more open to it than when my generation was that age.
Mm,
So it's the self-development is huge compared to when it was then. So anyway,
yeah.
that wasn't really probably a value to add at the end here. So I'll just continue watching what you're doing, because I'd be interested to see how a person, like I do business coaching, and then when I do it, I add in the life coaching, and they're like, wait a minute, I paid you for business coaching. And I'm like, you're a hybrid of both. You can't separate the two, you know? So when I hear a
Yeah.
family issue going on, I'm like, you need to stop. You need to pause your business growth right now and address your family. And they're like, what? I paid you for business coaching. I'm like, yeah, but I promise you they're both related. Like
Yeah.
you have to like, you can't keep growing if you've got all this crap going on at home. You got to deal with this. And then I help them deal with that. And then they go back to the business. Like they're both so interrelated, but it's really hard to sell people on that. They want to pay and they can justify the business, but they don't always realize that the family or your personal life and your professional life are actually not two separate entities. So I'm just trying to figure out how to get that across, but I'll figure it out as we go along. I think you help me just, I'll probably order it and walk today and I'll be like, oh, okay, now we got it.
Yeah. Well, that's like your unique perspective on it as well. And so with the growth, this is again like the whole ecosystem thing rather than direct response, where with direct response it's like you write the most like attention grabbing thing, you send them to the landing page, try to sell them immediately. But with the ecosystem, kind of what we're doing here is when we have the audience that we're starting to nurture, by nurture, we're kind of meaning like we're creating a narrative for people to follow. We're creating a story for people to follow along with. And so your entire job with this philosophy of yours is to like create a very compelling argument about how this business growth and personal growth are interrelated. You're priming people, like you're creating your own customers for this thing.
Okay, you just helped me I just got my aha right now because I had a client where this happened. Like it's a perfect example, and he'll probably let me go on record about it. So if I write a newsletter about how he came to me for business advice, and I
Mhm.
ended up giving him personal advice, and he didn't love it at the time, but 6 months later told me it was the best advice he ever got.
Yeah.
So I can probably use how that hybrid is what you actually need. Someone who's not going to treat each as a silo. You need
Mhm.
someone who's going to treat them as interrelated and blended. Okay, thank you. That
Yeah.
helps. Thanks everyone for listening to me just figure out and figure that out. You're like, this doesn't help me, but it helped me. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. But so that's something I definitely now I want to write about that, right? Because that's like my way of thinking about it is like personal branding is like you're creating your own world that people live in, and every world or reality has like a story or like the set of values or the vision for what we're all trying to achieve. What's the philosophy behind that vision? Like for like that specific product, it's like it's going to take longer. I saw Josh Lysek's um, tweet today where he said, "This is kind of what I've done unconsciously." Where he said, if you want to sell, not in his words, in mine, like the high consciousness stuff, the stuff that's difficult to market, then you have to create the book in that space because it's depth, it's authority, it explains your entire philosophy, and you're bringing people into your world. But book to me means deconstructed chapters in the form of content, articles, newsletters, where I can just consistently link those throughout my entire content creation journey. And so it's like a deconstructed book that like people start to get indoctrinated into over time and adopt your worldview, your perspective, and realize that you're the person that's going to be able to help them reach X endpoint.
You helped me with quite a few epiphanies just there too. It's just like I'm a tax expert by first trade, and people think it's all about numbers, but it's actually about people and what's going on in their life. And so I had a wait list. I could only take so many clients. I had a wait list, and it was because I didn't just treat it as doing taxes. I looked at the whole picture of what was going on in their life and created the best scenario and best lifestyle for them. I did counseling, put marriages together, psychology, like everything in the form of doing taxes and finances. So I think, and that was really a hybrid. So I didn't really think about the fact that I did my first career is the same thing I'm trying to do on Twitter. And I'm just trying to take what I already did in taxes, which I don't do anymore, and figure out how to do it maybe in a high end coaching situation. So anyway, you just helped me figure out yeah, I'm going to have to work on that a little bit, think through that a little bit more. So thank you.
Nice, no problem. But cool, sweet. We will end it there. That was a good call. I appreciate all of the challenging questions. As always, keep them coming in the Discord. Yes, looks like that was it. So I appreciate everyone for coming. I hope everyone has an absolutely amazing Saturday. And I'll see you guys in the Discord. The next module drops Tuesday, as always. And that's on. So everything, we've gone over everything where it's like we know what we need to do to grow. We know what we need to do to like create the actual content. We know how to start developing our own ideas and unique perspectives behind these things. And the next module is it may throw things off because it's like the nuances of every other platform and how to start like repurposing all of the content we're creating and using this system to create a very quick and efficient way of getting everything out to all platforms. But there's nuances that come along with that. So if right now priority should be growth, then prioritize growth and keep this in your back pocket for when that time comes to expand. So again, thanks everyone for coming. I'll see you in the Discord. Again, enjoy your Saturday.